You are but an impression, writes Epictetus, not at all what you seem to be. Welcome to our weekly Stoic lessons, straight out of a handbook for new Stoics, here on Painted Porch Strategies. Appreciate you hanging out with us. This is where we explore ideas and concepts of Stoicism and how we can apply them to our everyday lives. My name is Rob Hunter. This right here is our founder and CEO, Amy Yak. And over there is Sierra Ram, our mindfulness Sherpa and creator of Radical Mindfulness. So, ladies, this lesson in week 36 is really about our first impressions. And our first impressions, when you really think about it, are based on our experiences from moment of birth to where you're at right this moment. So you take all of this information, all this data that your brain has stored, and you look at someone and you go, that person is very attractive, or that person is a scumbag. Those are the impressions that you make right away. So before I dig in any deeper, I want to know what your initial impressions of this lesson called Catch and Apply the Dichotomy of Control to Initial Impressions.
Sierra, I'll let you go.
Well, I loved that they talked about, start to catch your judgments before they lead to anger, right? So the Stoics talk about anger as one of the passions, right? And passions aren't wrong. It's just you want to be in control of your reactions to the passions. So again, it's not that you shouldn't have feelings. You just want to kind of think about those feelings before you say something that you regret or do something that you regret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I really liked how it was just catching those impressions before they go out the door and before you say something that you're going to regret. It also makes me think about, Rob, you talk about in your Master Your Message program, how one of the things that kind of was an aha moment to you was when you heard a personal development speaker say your thoughts are not your own. And a lot of that is because of, as you mentioned, all of your experience, your life, your nature, your nurture that has taken you up into this point that has that immediate response, or that immediate thought, I should say, that impression. And it's really important that we don't just take that and run with it. We actually take a pause and just take a little look at it before we jump to that final conclusion.
Well, your body does things automatically. Your brain does things automatically. Mm-hmm. And this is that step of calling awareness to the automatic processes, because your brain, as Sierra talks about in her Radical Mindfulness course, is designed to help you survive. It's its number one job. It wants you to be alive. So it assesses things as safe, as a threat, somewhere in between all the time. And it's based on your life experiences. And that's why I like this lesson, because what Epictetus, and again, you got to think, how many thousands of years ago did Epictetus write this? A few thousand years ago.
It's been a minute.
Yeah. The fact that these Stoic leaders were so deep in their own head that they established this philosophy. And if you look at some of the other philosophies that came after this, a lot of it's based on Stoicism. There are elements of the Bible, some of the most teach-worthy moments in the Bible that seem to come straight from Stoicism to me. And I could be historically, factually inaccurate there, but it just seems that that is the case. Like for this one with Epictetus, you are but an impression and not at all what you seem. Then test it by those rules that you possess. And I interpreted that as sort of what we've talked about before, is your kind of words to live by. What are the words you want to live by? Who do you want to be? Because we're born as a person, and when you become aware, which the Stoics were, you sort of have like a blueprint, which we like to use here at the Painted Porch Strategies, for how you want to live. And if your impressions are not meeting that blueprint, how can you get them more in line? For example, brave. If you want to be brave, what would a brave person do? How would a brave person judge other people if you're driving down the street, or if you're walking by someone at a store? Mm-hmm. Is there a threat there or not?
Right. Well, and specifically for this lesson, it touches on one of the foundational concepts within Stoicism, which is the dichotomy of control. And when it comes to those impressions, even what Epictetus talks about here is he talks about, if you're going to test it, test whatever that impression is. First and foremost, evaluate whether or not it is something that is in your power or that is not within your power. And with that impression, what can you control? You cannot control the way someone else is behaving. What you can control is your impression of them. And then, I'm sure we're going to take this even further, taking the perspective view of, where they might be coming from, what their experiences are. But first and foremost, when it comes to that impression, whatever it is that you're observing, is it something that is or is not within your control?
So let's add to this too, because they use the word proficiens, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's an old Latin word that means the one who makes progress.
Mm-hmm.
This is really what I think the essence of Stoicism is all about, making progress as a human being and focusing on what you can control, not on what you can't. And this applies in so many different areas of life, whether you're having a dispute with a loved one, whether you are having a problem at work, or whether you're really enjoying something. Because it's those moments where you step back and you say, I am in control. And a lot of this comes into investing time in yourself. That's the other part of Stoicism that I love that comes up in this lesson, because what you're doing is you're investing in how you think and how your automatic processes work. And you're taking time to look at all of those things. And you have to almost set time aside for that. And the skills that we focus on here on Pain Support Strategy is the same kind of thing. So with mindfulness in Sierra's course, Radical Mindfulness, it's that same thing. Take time to be kind, essentially. For Amy's course on teamwork is all about that same thing. Take time to know who's on your team, how to interact with your team. And we don't just consider teams to be work teams. I mean, we're a team. 3 of us are a team. Amy and I are a team as husband and wife. Sierra and her husband are a team. Then you add in her son, they're a team. You have all kinds of different teams. And for my part, it's the communication. And if you're mindful about how you communicate with your teams, see what we're doing here? That's what this is it's taking the time to be effective in all those things. And the effective way to do that is to recognize your automatic processes so that you are the one who makes progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But not necessarily striving for perfection, because that's something that Stoicism, we always say, it is a practice. When we meet here on the porch, this is always a practice. We never pretend that we are perfect at it. We are Stoics in training, just like Epictetus was, just like Marcus Aurelius was. We're definitely not saying that we're at the same level that they are, but they were still practicing continually. These letters, as you mentioned, I think before, Robbie, that all of these letters, then these quotes that we can cite are because they had to constantly practice and remind themselves. And specifically for this lesson, it's that practice of your impressions and practicing to ensure that whatever the action is that results from that impression, that you've taken a moment just to pause. You just kind of hold it up. Say, hold on, let me look at you first. Let me examine what this is before I just react automatically.
Well, it says in the chapter, unlike the famous slogan, just do it. No, don't just do it. Stop and think about it first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have that impression that is sometimes automatic, and then you want to have that pause. I know Rob talks about this a lot in his Master Your Message course. You're going to have that pause where you're going to think about it, and you're going to ask about the dichotomy of control and also what virtue is most important to you. So it's allowing that virtue to guide your reaction, not just that first impression.
Mm-hmm. Because the first impression, it's automatic. I think you even talk about in your program, Rob, that quote that you saw that says, I'm not responsible for my first thought. But what's the rest of it?
I am responsible for my second thought and my first action.
And that's, I think, essentially the essence of what this is trying to get down to. That first impression, that's ingrained, that's automatic. That's tough to retrain. But what you can retrain is what you do next.
What you do with that impression.
What you do with that impression. It's just.
Well, there are certain situations where it's helpful,
Hereditary.
Right? If you're in a danger situation, it's helpful to have that fight or flight response automatically. But that's rare, especially the way we live now. I'm not saying it's impossible. Obviously, it happens, but it's rare that we need to use that as Sarah would say, oh, look, there's a saber-toothed tiger in the backyard. Oh crap. I need to run. I need to hide. I need to save myself.
Yeah.
And for non-situations like that, what is your impression and why? And they have us do an implementation exercise, which I would love to hear what you guys wrote down in yours. So this is the big part about Stoicism too, is writing things down, because when you write things down, it becomes more memorable for you. Even if you never look at it again, I think, what is the stat? You're 60% more likely to remember. So that's why I'm a big proponent of journaling. That's why I like this book, because they have you come up with that implementation and write it down. So Sierra, I would love to see and hear what your implementation was to sort of, I guess, create space of your impressions.
To catch them,
Mhm.
to catch them before they go out the door.
So the first thing they had me write down in our books was implementation to help you remember this first step in catching your impressions. So my implementation impression that I wanted to work with was frustration. Okay. So a lot of times I have a snap impression where I'm frustrated with something, probably something that somebody in my house did. I won't say who, but somebody something that frustrates me. Okay. So that would be my first impression. And then I said, now pause and take time for a second. Then after I catch that impression, is it worth feeling frustrated about? Or is joy a better choice for me?
Ooh, that's good.
So I'll just say one example. There's a towel situation in my house where people don't put the towel the way that I ask them to put the towel. Okay. Now it sounds really trivial, especially when I say it out loud. But at certain moments I'm like, why is the towel this way? We've talked about the towel. Well, then I have to stop and I have to say, does the way the towel is really matter? No. Is me just choosing to move on with my life, to choose joy instead of frustration, is that a better choice for me? And guess what? The answer is always going to be yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of obvious.
This is a great reminder, right? Because you're asking yourself about joy in those moments. That, again, if you can train yourself to ask that question automatically, which takes the work, then you can cycle through that process. Okay, frustration. Oh yeah, my question about frustration is, would I be better served if I'm in a state of joy? Oh yes, I would be. What makes me joyful? Oh, the fact that I have people in my house that put the towel on the rack, for example, even if it's incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
You got it.
Yep.
It's kind of like the pick your battles, right? In some way.
Yeah. Well, it is, but it's a very important lesson that you can implement every single day, because we all get frustrated by those types of things.
Yeah. The way people drink their coffee. I mean,
or sip their soup, right?
Yeah. And it's so trivial. And yet, especially when you talk to people who have been married a long time or been partners a long time, they would tell you that there's certain things that just are frustrating to them. But then you have to ask yourself, is it really worth you being frustrated about? Or to Rob's point, do you just find yourself grateful to have that person that you know so well slurps their coffee?
Well, I love that too. Those are great examples, because your impression should be that people should eat soup a certain way or chew with their mouth closed or whatever. But that doesn't mean it's the other person's impression. And that's where this comes in. So Amy, I'd love to hear yours. What is your implementation exercise? Because it does have to, in part, include other people's perspective, I think, or recognizing that there are other perspectives.
Yes. So mine was similar. Mine was more of I'm not going to say an ugh, because usually the ugh, but it's a it's a feel more so than an outward expression that gets voiced. It's more of an internal, like, I don't know. I'll say like a soft punch in the gut is usually how I feel. That's how frustration happens for me. It's just like, And so for that was my cue to pause and question. And my question was, is this how I really feel? That was the thing that for me was saying, is this how I really feel? And then from there, the follow-up is, how can I change this? Can I change this? Right? So back to that dichotomy of control. how can I change it? And if so, what can I change about this? And being able to very clearly identify, because that's the struggle. I suffer from a lot of shoulds, as we've covered over many, many weeks here, suffer from a lot of shoulds. And so for me, it's really being able to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, of what with this can I control and what of this can I not control. And so if I can control something, how can I change it? And most of the time, how I can change it is in my impression of it and whether the acceptance of it versus the trying to shoehorn something that I think needs to happen.
To make your impression universal. But I mean, that's the reality of it, is we all want to do that naturally.
Yes.
Like if only people saw the world the way I did, the world would be a better place. Never going to happen.
Yes.
So that's way outside of your control.
Yep.
But that's important.
As a former product owner and manager of software, I just want to product manage the world. And I want to design things in a way that makes sense to me. But I can't do that. That's not in my control.
Software is not responding.
I know.
But you can teach other people a
404
system
error.
and see if people will vibe with your system, because that's essentially what I think a lot of this personal development is you got to find the system that works best for you or that you vibe with. So you can look at 10 things and go, oh, okay, these two make the most sense. Or I'm going to combine these parts and put them together and create my own system. And here's how I learned the system.
Right. Right.
Anybody wants to vibe with that? Let's go. And if you don't, that's cool too, because you have your own impression. Mine was,
So I was gonna say, what was yours?
my impressions are merely my own based on my experiences. Because of this does not mean that they are automatically connecting nor incorrect. So not automatically correct nor incorrect. So my impressions, in other words, just because they're mine does not mean they're automatically correct or incorrect. They are, these impressions, merely a product of my environment. So reminding myself of that means, oh, okay. It's kind of asking yourself, what if the opposite were true?
How are you catching that?
How am I catching that?
Yeah. How are you catching it to then go through this?
Well, it's just again, it's that quick reminder that I feel this way. That does not mean anyone else feels this exact same way about this exact same situation. It's just my impression.
But is it when you have a certain type of thought? Is
It's all-
it where
it's all
you
thoughts.
feel it?
No, it's all thoughts. I mean, it's all feelings and thoughts. They're literally
Gotcha.
just mine.
Okay.
So and able to approach other people, whatever they say to me, I know that that's my initial reaction, not theirs, not how they're going to see the world. Whatever I say, come up with, answer, retort, explain something. It's only how I can best explain something based on my experiences.
Okay. All right.
So then I follow up as I'm in control of how I feel about this or that and how I think about this event. So I must choose wisely. That's when I'm in control of. Choose the wise emotion, the wise feeling, the wise reaction, rather than the automatic one.
Okay.
And sometimes the automatic one can be right. There's not to say that the automatic reaction is always wrong. You just have to make sure that it's the right one by giving yourself some space.
Okay.
Any final thoughts on week number 36? Catch and apply the dichotomy of control, one of the, if not the most important Stoic lesson to initial impressions. But you see how, if you've watched any of the other weeks, you can see how you develop and how you start applying the initial skills early on in this book. And if you haven't, you can go back and watch our other videos. You can see how this is like a step ladder approach. You add another rung at a time, and you add another rung as you learn this philosophy of Stoicism.
And this does tie back, and they even bring our attention to it, ties back to exercises we did in week 1 and 2. But the difference is that we're going to attempt to do this continuously throughout our day. So not just like with one isolated event, but are you continually noticing when these impressions come up, and are you responding to your first impression, or are you taking that pause?
This is like living Stoicism, not just momentary.
Yep.
So it's now the full embodiment of it. I love that. It's a great point, Sierra.
Yeah, because in week 1 and week 2, we just started by finding one thing that happened each day, or one thing that might be happening in the future that we were anticipating, and kind of evaluating what within that was and was not within our control. And so now it's that continual, as you mentioned, to be able to catch and examine that first impression before you take the action that would naturally follow. And so I think this is great. I think this is, they even say at the beginning of this section, which is our third section in this book, The Discipline of Ascent, they're like, all right, now we're getting real with this. This is going to include some heavy lifting further. It's going to challenge you even more because you have to be much more aware. Now, they've been priming us for this, but even still, it's being able to identify how you're going to catch it. So Sierra, for you, the ugh. For me, it's the and then and then for Rob, apparently it's just whenever he has a counter thought that
I'm never going to be perfect at it, but it's just that as much awareness as possible.
Mm-hmm. So whenever he feels a need to teach somebody something, maybe, or counter an idea.
Yeah, but there's also part of there's an exercise that I have in my course that really works perfectly for this exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to give it away though.
No.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
But yes, it's a great way to examine that impression and then take some additional steps to determine whether or not it's true, or what's the most healthy response that's going to benefit you. To your points here, what's going to be the thing that's going to serve you the most or bring you joy or not.
Exactly right.
Well, wonderful. Well, week 36 in the books.
We are Patient Port Strategies. That's Amy. That's Sierra. I'm Rob. What we do is we work together to work with you or your teams, your work teams, your home teams, to implement some of these lessons into your life. So again, mindfulness, what Sierra teaches, which is just a great way to approach life. Be mindful of others. Communication, my skill. Language is contagious. What are you spreading around? What language are you using? And how do you talk to yourself? That's the most important lesson I'm going to give you today as well. And then Amy's teamwork course, which puts the two together so that you can work with anybody, anytime, anywhere.
Exactly.
We'd love to work with you.
We would love to have you join us on the porch, where we have conversations like these, whether it's specifically about this practice that we're going through of Stoicism, this 52-week practice, but we talk about a variety of things, because all of these, we're humans interacting in this big blue planet of ours called Earth. And because of that, we're interacting with others. And sometimes that can be a struggle. And finding ways to show up as your best self through practices like mindfulness, being able to then effectively communicate and express your ideas with others, and then how you can collaborate as a team and for success. And because with the Stoics, they believe that we are all here to serve and help one another. So let us help you find ways to do that in your life, whether at work, business, or somewhere in between.
PaintandPortStrategies.com for more information. Of course, this week 36, which means there's 35 other Stoic lessons that we've gone through. We'd love it to join as well if you're interested in this philosophy called Stoicism. Sierra, you wanted to add something?
And we're going to continue here on the porch to attempt to be proficient, which means ones who make progress. And we hope you'll join us. Again, that website, www.paintedporchstrategies.com. And we're excited to see you on the porch.
And next week, week 37, we're going to go from our impressions to catching our judgments. So we will see you 1 week from today. Till next time.